Yeah, it's perfect timing. I want you to feel it.
Good morning, everyone. I thought I would bring you along for my Sunday reset routine as I reflect on some of what went well over the past few weeks of medical school and what I'm kind of nervous about for the next week of classes starting. So we had 1 week of orientation where we kind of just got to know each other. Then we had 2 weeks of clinical immersion, which is where we learned how to take a basic HPI or history of present illness of a patient. We learned some basics of physical exams like auscultation and palpation. 1 second, let me show you my cool stethoscope that I got from Duke. But I had a really positive experience with our standardized patient interview where an actor is trained to resemble some symptoms that a patient might have, and you can practice your interviewing skills to obtain a history and exam. And we also had a few resilience and professionalism panels that actually were really helpful in framing our mindset for going into medical school and developing a community within our class. As you can probably tell from how I'm dressed, first thing we're gonna do today is start off our morning with a workout routine.
It's not that I don't want you here. It's something about the way you stare into my eyes. I know that I don't make things clear. I fall for you every time I try to resist. We can get away. I'm chase beach views and every day. All I wanna hear is an episode how we play. Sit right next to you. I try not to show how I feel about you. Think I wish away. Really wanna, I just wanna get away. Sit right next to you.
It's been a few weeks in Durham and I've already found my new favorite coffee shop, so I stopped by there and grabbed some coffee as well. Let's brainstorm an agenda for this video. I'm gonna heat up some lunch, and while I'm doing that, first thing on the unofficial agenda is how has it been making friends? For those of you who are just discovering my channel, I'm from the Bay Area in California and I went to college in Rhode Island at Brown. And so moving across the country for undergrad was already a really big adjustment for me. I'm really grateful that I've already had the experience of transitioning to kind of living away from my family. And so thankfully the transition to living in Durham now has not been too stressful. I really vividly remember the first month of college where it was really difficult to make friends because I was in a class of I think 1,600 people. When making friends, you're ideally looking for people who have a similar interest as you. So in a sense, making friends in medical school is a little easier because we are all bonded by a shared interest of wanting to pursue medicine. Granted, the way that we do that is going to be very different from each other and we all are going to have unique pathways, but we're all taking the same classes. We can all relate to what's going on in our day-to-day. Surprisingly and fortunately, I think making friends has not been as scary as I might have thought going in. Just a little about my class. We have about 120 medical students, which includes the MSTP students, the PCLT students, which is like the primary care leadership track. Given such a small class size, which is pretty standard across medical schools, I would say they range anywhere from like 50 students a class to 200, I would say, at more of the larger medical schools. It's a very small class size compared to undergrad. Also, unsurprisingly, my class is full of really bright and ambitious people, and I think because of that, there are some internal and external pressures to succeed, even though we are just barely beginning classes. What I've heard from upper year medical students is that in undergrad you may have felt like you needed to join a ton of student organizations and really be on top of your studies to excel and succeed in whatever your definition of success may have been. Moving on to medical school, your primary responsibility is to stay on top of your coursework and then also prioritize your alone time and self-care before going into some of these extracurriculars and shadowing and all of that kind of stuff. The approach I think I'm gonna take is really to just adjust for my first few months and focus on my coursework and doing well on exams enough to pass. And so before, when I might have been focused on, you know, getting an A in my class, now I'm really trying to find the balance so I can pass and then use that extra time I would have spent studying on other things like shadowing and maybe exploring research opportunities in my second semester. I feel like I've put an internal pressure on myself to figure things out really quickly. I don't really know what I want to do in terms of my specialty, so it's kind of just a decision paralysis in terms of so many options that I still have in front of me. And because of that, I feel like there's an impetus to kind of dive headfirst and start exploring specialties when really I need to kind of take it a day at a time, focus on getting into a rhythm with my coursework and exams, and then start exploring a little. At this point, not gonna do anything really besides just my coursework and maybe a few extracurricular involvements after our activities fair, which I think is in September. And by a few, I think maybe 1 or 2, because I also kind of want to keep my YouTube channel going, and that's understandably a very big time commitment. In terms of external pressures to succeed, I feel like there are a very large handful of specialties that are very highly competitive. You're kind of incentivized to reach out to people in that department to figure things out and start getting involved in the field a lot earlier. I kind of have to remind myself that it's very rare for people to know going into med school what they want to do, and that plans are pretty much inevitably going to change. And that working on something within one specialty area and then transitioning to another doesn't mean that my initial work was lost. I received some really great advice from a current MS4 here at Duke. And essentially what he had said was that it's really important to first build a strong identity in terms of what you want out of your medical career. If you follow your passions, you can build a career out of what you love rather than the opposite, which is doing things just for a resume in a specific specialty area and ending up with a career that you really don't love. If you can make decisions about what you want to do now and what you're passionate about now, you will always build a career out of something that you will really enjoy. If you can let go of prestige and think about what you are passionate and really interested in now, you can always build a career out of what you love doing instead of being influenced by a very tunneled mindset of what you feel like your life should be in a few years. I don't know if this is making any sense, but it's just something that I've been thinking about. When you're doing things in undergrad to get into medical school, it feels like sometimes you're checking off boxes because you have to. But now that I'm in medical school, I'm really trying to remind myself to be honest and self-evaluate what my interests are before just committing to something. The last thing I wanted to talk about was study methods. So this has been something that has caused some anxiety among my classmates and I feel like there's a sentiment where we kind of want older medical students to tell us this is the one best way to study. And the reality is everyone studies really differently. On YouTube, I think there's definitely a very high representation of using Anki, and I might even call it a bit of an Anki elitism. But at Duke, I feel like it's a very small minority that actually uses Anki very religiously. And this probably has to do with the fact that we have a 1-year preclinical curriculum, and then we start clerkships in the beginning of our second year. Because of this, we don't know really when we're supposed to take step 1. Our timeline's a bit shifted from other more traditional curriculum, and it's really hard to finish like the Anki deck, for example, in just 1 year. I just unsuspended some cards in the biochemistry deck, and there are like 3,000 of them, and I'm expected to finish that in around like 6 weeks. The activation energy for using Anki is so high because once you start, you are committed and you have to do at least like a few hours of Anki every day. The reality is everyone studies super differently. A lot of people like to still write notes and draw diagrams. Some people like to teach their peers. Others will not even go to lecture and just watch boards and beyond. There are so many iterations of what you can do. Go to lectures or not, use Anki or not, write handwritten notes or not. And the resource overload, I think, is what is a big source of stress for me and other people. But I did download the V11 Anki deck and we'll try it out. We'll see how it goes. But very glad that the second year medical students have handed down some of their resources, like Anki decks that they made based off of the lectures, and also some decks for anatomy. Because Anki is a very visual platform, I've heard that it's helpful for especially learning anatomy. In terms of streaming lectures or not streaming lectures, I think for the first week I might go in person just to kind of socialize and see my peers, but second week and onwards, I think I'm probably just gonna stay in my apartment or go to a library and stream the lectures remotely so that I can pause and rewatch if I need to. I've also developed a habit of watching everything at like 3 times speed. I guess the last thing that I'll end on is that I was quite honestly very nervous to start medical school, but I have been really happy here and just enjoying my time, both with my classmates and people that are outside of our medical school, exploring the city and just spending time alone. And I know it's going to be hard. Med school is definitely going to be a very big challenge that I don't think I can even fathom at this point, but I'm excited and I feel like I'm in the right place, and that's a really hard feeling to come by. With all of that said, I hope you enjoyed this video and I'll see you next one.